Hey, welcome. The Apostle Paul in his letter to the Colossians gets so practical about one of the biggest challenges we all face, just living with each other. So we're going to dive into some of his really profound advice on how our faith really shapes our most important relationships.
Okay, let's just jump right in with the question that always causes the most debate when people read this passage. It's a piece of text that has been, frankly, really misunderstood and even abused over the years. So, what was Paul actually getting at?
So, in this explainer, we're going to try and look past all the common misinterpretations. Our goal is to really get to the heart of the matter, to understand the balanced, Christ centered principles Paul lays out. And not just for marriage, but for all of our relationships at home, with our kids, and yeah, even at work.
Now, to get any of this right, we've got to start with the foundation. Who was Paul even talking to in the first place? You'll see that this context changes everything.
See, this isn't just some generic self-help advice. Paul's writing to people who have chosen to follow Jesus. And this new life, well, that's the whole starting point. It completely changes the why and the how behind the way we interact with other people. It's the framework for everything that comes next.
So let's see how this whole new life thing applies to marriage. This is where we find those really challenging verses about husbands and wives. So let's break them down carefully.
The first thing you've got to notice is this. Paul's instructions are always paired up. He talks to wives, and then boom, he immediately turns and talks to husbands. This isn't a one-way street. It's all about mutual responsibility and a relationship built on give and take. Okay, so let's tackle that big word, submit. It is so important we get this right. The Greek term, hupotasso, doesn't mean being a doormat or some kind of slave. It actually means to voluntarily arrange yourself under someone else to yield out of love and respect. And the key phrase here is, as is fitting in the Lord. It means a wife's first loyalty is to Christ, and her respect for her husband is really an expression of her faithfulness to God.
And then, look at the other side of the coin. The standard for husbands is incredibly high. They're commanded to love with agape love. That's a selfless, sacrificial kind of love that always puts the other person's needs first. It's supposed to be a picture of the love Christ has for the church, a love that led him to give up everything.
And just in case that call to agape love wasn't clear enough, Paul adds this little command. The word he uses for bitter here, pikerno, was often used to describe a tyrant. So he's directly saying, don't be harsh, don't be oppressive, don't be demanding. A husband is explicitly told not to be a tyrant. True leadership in this model is all about service, not about domination.
All right, next up, Paul takes these exact same ideas, mutual respect and responsibility, and applies them to the relationship between parents and their children. And would you look at that? There it is again, that same balanced pattern. Paul talks to the children, asking them to obey, and then he immediately pivots to the parents, giving them a very specific role to play in the relationship.
This famous verse from Proverbs is often misunderstood. It's not some magic formula that guarantees a child will never make a wrong turn. The original language suggests it's more about creating a taste or a preference for God. It's about building a love for spiritual things right into their heart, a foundation they can always come back to, but it still respects that they have a choice to make.
So the parents' job is spelled out pretty clearly. They're told not to provoke or exasperate their kids because that would just discourage them. The goal is to create this environment of love and encouragement, leading by example to build them up, never to tear them down.
So now let's widen that circle a little bit, out into the public world. These Christ-centered ideas, they don't just stop at our front door. They're meant to completely change how we think about our jobs and the people we work with.
Okay, we have to talk about the language here because, let's be honest, it's jarring. Paul uses the words slaves and masters. Now, it is so important to understand he was not giving a thumbs up to the kind of brutal, race-based slavery that came later. He was working within the Roman economic system of his day, and what he said was actually revolutionary for its time.
What Paul does here is he basically flips the whole system on its head from the inside. He tells slaves to work with integrity, as if they're working for the Lord himself. But then, and this was radical, he tells masters they have to be just and fair because they also have a master in heaven who doesn't play favorites. This just put everyone on equal footing before God, and it completely undermined that whole oppressive power structure.
So how does that apply to you and me today? Well, the principle is timeless. We're supposed to approach our work, no matter what our job is, with sincerity and integrity, like we're doing it as an act of worship to God. And if you're a boss or a manager, You have a divine responsibility to treat the people who work for you with justice, fairness, and deep respect. And all of this brings us to the one principle that ties everything together. It's the practical tool that helps us show the world what a life truly changed by Christ looks like.
This is really the core of it. Our speech, our words, should be seasoned with salt. Just think about what salt does. It preserves, it adds flavor, it purifies. Our words, whether we're talking to our spouse, our kid, or a coworker, should be full of grace and wisdom. They should be meant to build people up, making even hard truths a little easier to hear. And that's why all of this matters so much. Our everyday interactions in our homes and at our jobs, that's our most powerful testimony. How we live with each other, with that grace and love, it just speaks volumes, way louder than any sermon ever could. So, as we start to wrap this up, let's bring it home. I want you to think about your own house. What's maybe one practical way your family can better reflect this selfless, graceful love of Christ to each other and to the people around you? And let's stretch that thought out a little wider, to our whole community. You know, our churches are supposed to be like a family. So how can our church community do a better job of showing this supportive, loving, and grace-seasoned spirit to one another and to every single person who walks through our doors?
Hey, if you found this explainer helpful, please go ahead and subscribe for more. And we would seriously love to read your thoughts on these ideas, so please share them with us down in the comments below.
And if you want to go even deeper on these topics, I highly, highly recommend checking out the Sabbath School with Mako podcast over on Spotify. Thanks so much for watching.